living La Vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs. Time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage. We're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal. Yeah, you're getting closer, motivated and focused. Don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
So guys, today I have Cheryl McColgan here. She is Heal, Nourish, Grow over on Instagram. And Cheryl, you and I did this already. We actually did a live on Instagram. When I do my podcast, I go live, and then a couple weeks later, they show up on my podcast. And for some reason, when we downloaded this video and thus the audio, it truncated like your whole story. It's like, Instagram didn't like your story? What's going on? So we're on Skype right now. We're going to splice this together with the rest of the interview, but I wanted you to be able to tell your story. Let me briefly tell people who you are. You are writing lots of articles. You do coaching, inspirational posts. You've got a great podcast, which I was just a guest on recently, called Heal, Nourish, Grow. Go check it out, you guys. But yeah, you're out there doing your thing. Tell us your background. How did you get into the ketogenic diet? What led you here?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks again. I think it's just the world's way of saying that we needed to talk again and spend FaceTime. So, and I'm always happy about that. So I don't mind at all. But yeah, to kind of share how I got into it, I'll kind of go a little further back first because I think it's relevant. But because we talked about this the first time, I grew up as a little girl in Louisiana on the farm, and we were pretty, poor. Just to put it plainly. And so a lot of our food came from, what we were growing on the farm. My dad had a huge, 1 or 2 acre vegetable gardens. This is a big garden we're talking about here, not like my little 5x5 that I have now, and an orchard and cattle and pigs and all of that kind of stuff. So I feel very fortunate in that way that I kind of grew up eating whole foods. My dad was really into the whole running boom thing at the time. We're talking early 70s. And so there was no junk food in the house, no sodas, no cereal. And not only could we not afford it, it just wasn't as common back then. And so I think that really helped me as I got older to be able to come back to whole foods. That's not to say, because I think I shared in the first one, when I was a teenager and I got my own job and I got a car, I was I'd never really had junk food that much before. So I kind of went a little overboard, and thankfully being, young teenage metabolism and fairly active, I got away with it. But I remember, I'll tell you, I didn't say this the first time, but this is really embarrassing thing that I used to do. There's a place in the Midwest called UDF. It stands for United Dairy Farmers, and it's an ice cream store. And they make milkshakes and all that stuff too. But I would go, and this is on the way to school. This is not in the afternoon or whatever. But for breakfast, I would get a 32-ounce UDF milkshake, and on top of that, a pack of Grandma's chocolate cookies. Do you know those are about this big around?
Oh yeah, I grew up in the South. Grandma's is the bomb. That's the big cookies. Yes.
Oh, I mean, they're delicious, but they're huge, and they're just like packed with sugar. I mean, if I said it's got like 200 grams of carbs, I think that's probably not an exaggeration.
Easily, yes.
Yeah. So I did that for a little while, for a couple of years, got it out of my system. Fortunately, knock on wood, didn't seem like too many bad effects. But and then, I started running myself for many years, 17 years. And during that time, I was, cooking a lot, eating whole foods, but certainly still a lot of carbs, especially, back in the day when you're a runner, before all these guys like Finney and Bullock are coming out with the new way of being into athletics and stuff. It was just a thing that you were supposed to eat a lot of carbs and carb load. And that's how you got ready for races, or that's how you fueled this sort of active life. And so I did all of that, and spent 7 years as a vegetarian somewhere in there too. And then finally, as I had gotten older, I was going through a divorce, and I started working at a job where I was traveling around the world, producing conferences for the tech industry, and a ton of stress, not sleeping well. Yeah. And so those culmination of factors, even though I was still eating a, fairly relatively whole foods diet, but maybe still heavier carbs at that point, I was putting on weight, and I didn't feel like I was really doing anything all that different as far as what I was eating. But it was these other things like the stress and the travel and the lack of sleep that I think really just culminated with eating not quite right for where I was in my life that made that happen. And so somewhere along the way there, also then my dad had gotten cancer. And I started doing, and I'd had my own health problems. So I started doing a little bit more self-exploration on, hey, like, we got to get a handle on this here because, meanwhile, here's my dad had done this kind of healthy stuff his whole life, and he's got cancer. I'm, putting on weight. I'm completely stressed. I just don't feel healthy. I didn't feel vibrant. And so I went down this little rabbit hole of looking more into nutrition, looking more into, at that time was around the time the Nobel Prize for autophagy had come up. So that was in the news. And so I kind of got onto that and I started reading more about that. It's like, oh, fasting. I'm like, finally, somebody's saying fasting's not crazy. This is amazing.
What was funny, Cheryl, was that came out in October of 2016. 1 week before my book with Dr. Fung, The Complete Guide to Fasting, came out. I was like,
oh, wow.
How cool was that timing for the autophagy Nobel Prize for some guy from Japan. It was a really fancy, long Japanese name. I don't remember it, but he won that. And I was calling Jason and going, holy crap. Our book hit number 7 on Amazon, all books. And then it ultimately went to Wall Street Journal bestseller and international bestseller. Yeah, we definitely benefited from that timing. So
yeah, that was amazing. And I have to say, I mean, I did too, because after seeing that and I put it all together with the cancer and and I was familiar with fasting for many, many years because I was involved in the yoga community my whole adult life. And in the yoga community, fasting is not a weird thing. It's not. But prior to your book, prior to even now, people will say this, especially if you're a person that, if people for some reason think you don't need to lose weight, right. It's not all about losing weight, as you well know, the fasting thing. And that's not why I particularly do it. But even talking about it before, you'd get funny looks, or people would worry you had an eating disorder, or they just didn't understand why, or why you wouldn't want to do that. So that's become part of my passion and part of what I try to do to put out in the world about that sort of stuff, so that people are just more educated about it, that people that are doing it for health purposes, in fact, it's part of a lot of cancer protocols now.
Well, and a lot of women are scared of fasting. We didn't talk about this the first time, so we're going to talk about it now. But Perfect. A lot of women are scared of fasting because there's these notions that women can't fast. It'll mess with your thyroid. It'll mess with your hormone balance. You won't be able to ovulate properly. It'll mess with your period, all those things. And I've never seen evidence of that. If anything, I've seen evidence of exactly the opposite. It optimizes your hormones. It allows your body, especially if you have insulin resistance or a manifestation of it like PCOS, it helps calm all that down so you can get pregnant, so you can be a woman.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be fair, I'm sure there are people, men and women alike, that maybe struggle with fasting for whatever reason, whether it's psychological or physical.
Yes.
But I think for the most part that the fear is unfounded. And I think what I always say every time I talk about it, and I feel like I have to say it every single time, I'm like, you are in control of this. This is not starving. You can eat anytime you want. So it's not scary. It's like, just try it and see what happens,
That's totally the difference when people say, oh, you're just starving yourself. I'm like, no, starving yourself means you don't have access to food and you can't eat. That's starving. But when you're in total control, I love that, by the way. Keep repeating that every time you do interviews and every time you talk on your podcast. But when you have control and there's food in the fridge and I'm in an active fast, I can go and break it. I'm just choosing not to for the moment because I got a bigger goal.
Exactly. And that's, a big part of, and maybe, I don't know if it was in the part that got cut off or not, but, another thing I always like to talk about for people is finding your why. And for me, finding my why had a lot to do with my dad's cancer. Yeah. And, do I love to cook and love to eat? Everybody knows the answer to that. But I feel like, doing an extended fast once a month. Yeah, right.
Like every other post on your Instagram is all these pictures of food. Well, now I'm not finding food. There they are. There's the food. Yeah, like I love because your food photography is amazing, and you show some videos. Like definitely make it look so. And there you had me at that one.
That's my favorite meal right there.
Yeah. Same. Give me a slab of meat and I'm happy as a camper.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of the fancy stuff for the website, and because I do think when people are first transitioning to low carb, they're worried they're going to miss bread. They're worried they're going to miss pasta. They're worried they're going to miss their pancakes or their waffles or whatever it is. And so I think in the beginning, trying to find those substitutions are really useful for people. And hey, you know what? If that's the only way they can do it all together, then that's still far better than being on the train to diabetes and carb addiction and all of that. So I try to put that out there for that reason. But on a day-to-day basis, for me, I'm ridiculously boring with my food. It's like a steak, some eggs, piece of chicken here and there. That's about it.
Look, to me, the simplicity of even a carnivore keto kind of approach, which is more what I choose to do now, just easier for my lifestyle. It's the foods I enjoy. You know, I used to make myself eat the vegetables because we know you need the vegetables. And at some point, I'm like, I just defaulted to not eating those things. And I've done fine. I feel great.
Yeah. And for people that want, I think you talk about this in passing in a lot of your books, and you certainly talk about it on the podcasts and stuff. But if anybody ever wants to read a book that's more focused on that and kind of give you a reason to say, oh, maybe I don't need the vegetables, The Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. And then Sean Baker has one also. I haven't read that one yet, but he lays out a pretty good argument for the anti-nutrients in plants and the things that they can cause in your body and why you might not actually need to eat vegetables, which is kind of a revelation.
Well, and once you learn about oxalates and lectins and all these kind of nasty plant chemicals, not to say you can't detox from them, not to say you can never have them. Like, I love me some avocado, but they got a lot of oxalates in them. But I love avocado. And so I'm not going to stop eating avocado. Same with almonds. I'm not going to stop eating. I think it's all about the poison is in the dosage. Mm-hmm. And if you're like constantly eating, and especially the keto people, oh my gosh, all the people that use almond flour for everything. Yeah. I think about those people getting oxalate overload. And so finding kind of that happy medium for yourself is what we're all seeking to find.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's different for everybody. And I think one of the good things that you hit on last time that I hope didn't get cut off was the point about when we talk about whether this diet or this way of eating works for us or works for people. And if you're not on video, I was just doing the air quotes because it's like, what works for you? I mean, I struggle with this because I often hear, well, the diet that works for you is something that's sustainable. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true because anybody can sustain a crappy garbage donut diet. That's pretty easy and it's delicious. Yeah. But does that mean it's truly working for you, like for your health? I mean, I don't think so.
And this is where the vegetarians get into trouble because they go vegetarian and they feel better, Cheryl. And so they attribute it, oh, it must be the plant-based diet. It must be because I'm avoiding animal foods, when it could be they got off of junk food. Mm-hmm. And the blood sugar craziness finally calmed down and the inflammation goes down. Look, vegetarian and vegan, they have their benefits in that very short term. And so people become evangelists for vegetarian, vegan, and until they don't, because then things start to turn the other way. And there was a big trend last year. It might have started a little bit the year before, but last year, a bunch of YouTube vegan and vegetarian people, they started eating meat again. And they tried to get away with it, and they'd go on camera and apologize to their followers. And I'm thinking, don't apologize because your body is nutrient deficient in some things. And now tell them, teach them, use this as teachable moments. Who was that one?
One was Fully Raw Christina, I think.
Yeah, that's one. And then there was Veganana or something. There was some big name in that realm, talking like hundreds of thousands, even million viewers and subscribers. And now they're coming out and going, yeah, I need them. I need fish. I need eggs in my diet. Look, I think a vegetarian vegan approach could work if you would just include just those foods, eggs, fish. And you don't have to go to the red meat yet. I do think at some point red meat would be a great superfood to add back, but get those at least complete proteins back into your diet again.
Well, and I think it's like probably based on the reason that people do things, like if they're for ethical reasons or they just love animals, that's going to be hard for me to argue that. But if you're really looking for optimal health, it's pretty hard to make a case that vegetarian diet is optimal. Now, some of the research that's floating around out there will tell you different. In fact, I just saw a headline today that got me lit up. It was, it was about stroke risk in relation to saturated fat.
It's a Harvard study. I'm about to do a rant about it. So
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Harvard study, and yeah, they made the point of, if you're going to choose fats, get it from vegetable sources, which it's so funny they say that, because then they can make the argument for vegetable oils, and they said from vegetable sources. I don't know why I'm talking about Elmer Fudd. Sources with having the vegetable sources. But yeah, they want to include vegetable oils in there, and of course avocado oil, olive oil, and things like that. But vegetable sources, it's code for we don't want you to eat meat.
Yeah, and that is obviously coming up a lot more in the media lately. But and you know, this other stuff with the studies that say that vegetable oil can lower cholesterol. But then we're back to your deal about how I told you one of the other ways I came to know your work was cholesterol clarity. And do we even need to worry about cholesterol? And the answer is probably no. But anyway, we probably more than covered what we covered before, and some new stuff, did we?
We did get into a lot of new things. That's why I don't mind redoing some podcasts. So let me set up what you're about to see, you guys. So Cheryl and I had a wonderful conversation on Instagram Live, and so we're going to show you the rest of that now. It's still another half hour plus of content, but I think we got into the quality of food, why you are a clean keto person. Why don't you set it up a little bit about why you choose clean keto and why dirty keto you think could be a slippery slope and why it might be challenging. What are your thoughts on why you choose clean keto?
Yeah, well, first, before I say why I personally do that, I just want to say that I think however people get to making this change, I'm happy about it. I'm all for it. And plenty of people will joke that they do dirty keto and that's all they can do. And I'm like, I'm like, thank goodness, because you're still healthier. So
any keto is better than no keto.
Exactly. And I got this comment recently, a very mean comment actually, about, talking about how I always say, this is just how I do it. It's not the only way to do it. But the reason I do it is because of all the health problems in my family's past and my personal health history and all the cancer that's in my family. Yeah. I choose to eat the way that I'm eating because I've identified that as a strong why for me. Like, I want to be around for grandchildren and I want to try to help more people while I can. And I can only do that if I'm healthy and cancer free. So that's why I do an extended fast every single month. So I just want to always make it crystal clear that there are many ways to be healthy and many ways to do keto and all of that. But those are the reasons why I choose clean keto. And I certainly think for most people over time, the more whole foods based you can be, the better, because a lot of these things, especially now, because we've gotten such a proliferation of quote unquote keto foods, but they're still, it's still the same. Like, so for example, when I was eating a whole foods based diet and trying to maintain a decent weight and stuff, did I eat a cookie or a donut every single day of my life? No, I did not. And yet people go on keto and they're like, oh, but it's keto. And they'll start eating the keto treat every day and they'll start eating all the almond flour. So I just think, like you said, it's a very slippery slope. And particularly if your goal is weight loss,
yes,
the more that you cut out those things, the better you're going to do as far as weight loss. Now, when you're in maintenance mode, hey, it's just like before. You might have a treat occasionally, and that's good. It's good for the soul. It's good for everything. But I don't know if you need to have one every day.
Well, the other thing it does, Cheryl, before we go to the previous content, one thing it does is it retrains your brain when you don't eat those things. It retrains your brain how normal eating is supposed to be. I think our brains have been so entrained that we need a cookie after a meal, that we need some side. That's why we eat the sides that we do. We need. And it's because culturally, that's what we have hardwired within us. But moving over to more animal-based foods, like, I don't miss sides. I don't miss desserts. If I want a little dark chocolate now and again, I'll have dark chocolate, but it's not a big deal and not very much. Like, used to, I'd have a big old hot fudge cake as a dessert. Now a dessert could be a little sliver of dark chocolate and I'm good. That's all I need or all I want.
Yeah, no, I think that's a excellent point, because as you know, I'm very focused on the psychological side, a lot of this stuff, just because of my training and degree. But you're right. And also it just trains your taste buds away from sweet foods and gives you more the ability to sense really subtle flavors in real food. Because when you're eating a lot of really salted, really, and I'm not saying salt is bad, but really salt and really sweetened, that sort of, they call it the bliss point in your brain.
Yes.
It really affects you on a dopamine level where it prolongs the addiction. So if you just cut it out completely, then you're more likely to have success long-term changing that pattern, as you said.
And the food manufacturers, they have perfected that bliss. What was it? Salt, Sugar, Fat by Michael Moss. If you've never read that book, it's really a fascinating read on this very thing about how the food industry has manipulated our taste buds and our brain and the way we respond to food. So, all right, so we're going to make a transition. I don't know how clunky it's going to be, but it is what it is. Thank you, Cheryl. We're going to now go to our other interview and finish the show. But guys, go check it out. Keep watching, and here we go.
Keto can be hard. Tabulating, measuring, baking, taking 3 months to perfect one recipe, and to mixed reviews.
Did something die in here? Oh, I think it moved.
And by that point, you give up your diet, find a dark corner, and stuff yourself with sugar, carbs, and regret.
This, isn't what it looks like.
Well, this is where Keto Chow saves the day. The easiest, tastiest, ketoist meal replacement on the market.
It's like ice cream melted in my mouth.
Yes, but melted ice cream with all the protein, nutrients, vitamins, and electrolytes your body needs.
Oh, that's cool.
And with 3 starter kits, each with restaurant tips, keto food guides, and a ton of flavors to try, your taste buds and your waistline will thank you.
Thank you.
So grab your starter kit today at jimmylovesketochow.com.
It's so easy.
Keto Chow. Make keto easy.
I'm fine with that.
It's why I'm not against the keto products. I'm not purist. I'm not against them totally, but your goal is to get off of them. That if it's a transitionary and your grandma always made oatmeal cookies and now you have an oatmeal cookie that's keto, okay, eat that for a period of time, but then the goal is to get off of it. And I feel kind of like titrating down on the carbs slowly, titrating off of regular soda to diet soda. Like my original weight loss in 2004, I went on the Atkins diet and I went from 16 cans of Coca-Cola. Yeah, it was a lot. All the way, only 8 cans of diet soda. Now, was that a compromise that was good? You betcha. That was a big compromise because number one, I cut the consumption in half, but then cut down all that sugar I was eating. And then, of course, I titrated down from there and did it naturally. I didn't put any parameters. Well, I have to be off of them by, no, I didn't do that. And it helped me. And I think people, to help simplify keto, you kind of have to find what are those things that you can transition to that are better, knowing that the end game is real whole food, clean keto at the end. Put out there, and they eat everything. They even eat each other's poop, so they eat everything. Out there, and they like sniff it and walk away. I'm like, nope, hard no. Not even my chickens will eat it. So that's my little litmus test. But if they gobble it up, I'm like, oh, they like that. There's something in that they really like. So
I love that. I don't have any chickens, so I just have to go by the label.
Yeah.
But I think some of the most disappointing things are keto breads and keto.
Oh.
Anything that's going to try to be like bread.
Yeah.
People will say to me sometimes, one of my friends, she has a health thing right now, and she's starting to try to do, at least for, I don't know if she'll do it long term, but she is doing lower carb. And she said, oh, I'm going to make this pot pie. Do you have a good recipe for crust? And I'm like, let me just be honest with you. If you're not trying to be keto, you're just being low carb. I'm like, please just make the regular crust, because I'm like, it'll be so disappointing. And it doesn't, it aligns with her goal. She's not gluten intolerant. She's not trying to be keto. She can go low carb. I'm like, just use a really nice, real biscuit, but just have one.
Yeah.
And enjoy that. And I think if you don't have a lot of these other health issues, that's something you can do, and it's an option. Now, if you are trying to be keto or you're trying to lose a ton of weight, and you know this about yourself, like if you eat that one biscuit, you're going to go off the rails, or you're going to get a bunch of cravings, or you're going to spend a week or two getting back on track because you're going to be, deciding, okay, well, I had one, I can have this now, I can have that now. You got to know yourself mentally, how you're going to react to those things.
There are like there was a Bisquick version that's low carb called Carb Quick. I remember when it was out. And I tried it, but then I looked at the ingredients and it's very soy based. So then you have to talk about the estrogenic effects of soy, and do you want all of that in your body? And a lot of these alternatives, look at the ingredients. If it's not kind of whole foods, if it's not something that you would like readily go buy those ingredients, the xanthan gum and all the other things that go into it. Not saying xanthan gum's bad. It's used in a lot of keto recipes, but like look at maltodextrin and all these little ingredients. Is that what you want to put in your body? And the honest answer is most people would say no. And is it better than the real thing? I mean, I guess that's subjective at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all subjective for sure. But I mean, again, a lot of the substitute stuff I've had, I'm just disappointed. And because I don't have diabetes and because I don't have any gluten issues, seemingly on occasion, when the real thing that's got maybe like 5 ingredients instead of one of these bars that's got all these chemicals and chicory root and stuff that's going to give you gastrointestinal issues. I'd rather just have the real thing, but that's me.
Oh, the exception to that, what you just said, is if it has seed oils in it, I'm avoiding like the plague. We're learning
Me too.
much more about canola oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, all these oils that are highly inflammatory. And look up the work of Dr. Kate Shanahan. She's done the yeoman's work on this. That fat that you consume, those fats, they stay in your body for years and they don't get and they become part of your fat cells. And it's just like, no, I don't want any part of that. So even more so than carbohydrates, it's kind of shocking because I'm the low carb guy. I'm almost the low seed oil guy before I'm low carb, because I feel like they're a lot worse than we ever knew. And now we know a lot more. When you know better, you do better.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount, and I'm really happy about this. There's a huge amount of discussion about that right now in the keto, low carb, carnivore community. And anytime I get the opportunity to talk or speak with people now, I do always try to throw that in. It's like, if you take nothing else away from me, even if you never want to go low carb, if you never want to go keto, just quit eating the garbage oils. I think that is an amazing place to start, and it's an easy substitution for most people, unless they still have the mindset about saturated fat. Then there's more explanation needed, right? But the soy is probably one of the worst. I think I shared this with you, that I had one of the things that in my past is I had these health issues, and I ended up having like 3 or 4 surgeries for these tumors that weren't cancerous, thankfully. But that was a big part of my wake-up call. And a big part of that, when that happened, was my doctor had said, and this is after having been vegetarian for 7 years, was don't have any soy ever, basically. And it made me think, like, was having these replacement vegetarian type products at the time part of the reason that I even got those tumors to start with, and the garbage oils like you're talking about. So I think, like you said, when you know better, you do better. And that is one ingredient I avoid like the plague. If there is any soy, it's like, no, thank you. I'm just not doing that.
I'm going to take a little bit of pride because I wrote this book in 2012, it came out in 2013. And in chapter 8, I wrote carbs and vegetable oils, the twin villains in your health. So
nice. So you're basically like, so why didn't somebody start listening to you then? You know?
Well, and I have the paleo community to thank for that, because I was really active in the paleo world. I was talking about ketogenic diets, and I was kind of like more kind of paleo keto and trying to make keto a thing there. And then, so yeah, we wrote that book, and they were very influential on that. So I think that's the thing. We should pick up what the good parts are of any movement. Like right now, keto's on the way out, and kind of carnivore, maybe like real foods kind of the thing. So we just need to latch on to the good parts of any movement. I think even the vegan movement has good parts. They're about cutting out like the crap in your diet. Now, some of them are for substituting crap with their version of crap, but for the most part, why a vegan diet works so well is you're eliminating the processed junk. And that's why people do well. Is that what you noticed when you were kind of vegetarian?
Well, it was interesting because people would always say, you know, that was, of course, the thing at the time where we thought we knew that was what was so healthy, right? Like all these things. But, you know, people would always say to me, oh my gosh, you must feel so much better. And I'm like, actually, no, I don't really feel any different. And then as the years went on, I started feeling less and less good. And I don't know. It's interesting, but I do think for the most part that I always have people that are like, I just don't know if I can go that extreme. I'm like, you don't have to be that extreme. I'm like, just eat more whole foods, even if that's a potato, even if that's a sweet potato, but just stay away from the stuff in a box. And if people would just do that alone, you'd feel so much better for your health. Get rid of all these chemicals, get rid of the artificial stuff. And so I think, I'm hoping that that's one of the reasons I didn't want to, originally I was going to call my show like Keto for Life because I'm very passionate about it. And I do, of course, want to talk to a lot of people in our space. But at the same time, I didn't want to scare people away because my message is really, you can find a way to do this that makes you healthier without there being a lot of dogma, without there being a lot of stress about it and overcomplicating it. If you just go to the thing, that is one thing I would love about the Whole30 movement, because a lot of people will try that because it doesn't scare. It's like, okay, 30 days, I can do anything. I'm just going to cut out sugar. That makes sense. Pretty much everybody can get down with that plan now. Less sugar. They get that idea. But when you say keto, like keto's got a marketing problem. Like people, I went to my doctor a few years ago or whenever, I think it was right after I first started. And as is the case with some people, particularly if you're like kind of a lean person already, your body starts up-regulating these processes to shuttle fat all over your body. And so what happens is you get this number on your cholesterol that's like, whoa. And I'm thinking it was, if I say it was like 400 or 500 total, I'm not even kidding. But this was like very shortly after, and I was actively in weight loss mode. So your body is utilizing fats. That makes perfect sense in terms of physiology. But my doctor, she said something about, I said something about keto, and she's like, oh, well, just don't be, drinking all those oils and everything all the time. And I'm thinking, what do you think people are? I'm like, all I'm doing is eating vegetables and meats. Does that sound like a bad diet to you?
Yeah.
Okay, it makes no sense.
That's the thing, Cheryl. It's like if you leave the 4-letter K word out of it and you just describe what you eat, oh, wow, that's pretty healthy. Whereas if you say keto, it comes with attached baggage, so to speak. I was talking to a new friend recently. Oh, what do you do? And I told him about keto. Oh, wow, the keto, it's good for the short term, but long term, it's got issues. And okay, what issues? Well, you don't keep the weight off. You got to keep, a balanced diet and everything. And I started talking with her a little more about that. But it's just amazing. Immediately, it's a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, my gosh, that's unhealthy. Not really kind of looking at what you're doing, but just assuming that definition meant one thing. And look, let's be honest. Keto is not a diet. It never has been a diet. Keto is short for ketosis, which is a metabolic state. And your version of keto is going to be different than mine. And yet we both get in that same metabolic state to get the benefits from it. And so keto does have a marketing problem because it was pitched as a diet. That's why you didn't see me write keto diet clarity. It was wanted people to understand that keto was much, much deeper than even about weight loss.
Well, I think that the real beauty of it is the hormonal changes that it produces in your body so that you can actually, eat whole foods and not be hungry all the time. And once people get that, I think they'd be a lot less against trying it. And then I also like to tell people, people are like, oh, I remember one time, this is after I'd been in this for a long time. My dad knows that I've got the site and I'm doing all this. It's like, oh, keto is just on the worst diets list from the U.S. News and World Report. And I'm like, but Dad, you see what I eat. I make you food whenever I'm with you. I'm like, that's what I eat every day. Do you think that's bad? And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, that's the problem. So what I like to describe it now to people is I say that it's really, because people want, where's the research? I'm like, well, where's the research? We've done a 30-year experiment on people eating the crap that we've been eating in the U.S. and how has that worked out? And we have no research on that. Like, let's research the standard American diet. Shall we? So I say it's like the Mediterranean diet, really, with a little less grains. I don't know. And there's been plenty of research on the Mediterranean diet. So if all you're doing is taking out some grains, how is that a bad diet? I just don't get it.
By the way, the U.S. News and World Report, I've been blogging about this for 17 years. I've been doing this because they come out every January, and they're going to come out again in January 2022. It's coming up, guys. Get ready for it. And it's going to put keto at the bottom of the list, and here's why. The litmus test for that particular list is the food. So I see it as a badge of honor that if the litmus test is this really crappy monolithic diet, and you're the last on the list, that's the ones I want to try, the ones at the bottom of that list, because they're trying to say, well, it's too much saturated fat, it's too much this, it's too much that, and you have red meat, and we know red meat has cancerous, blah, blah, blah. And it's like all predicated on no good research. A lot of it is epidemiological research or animal studies. They've never really looked at a true ketogenic diet for the U.S. News and World Report. And yet there's lots of studies that are out there. Where's the research? The studies are out there. This guy back here has done a bunch of it. That's Dr. Steve Fitty and Dr. Jeff Folick and Eric Westman. I mean, I could go down the list of all my friends that are researchers that have done the work. They don't want to hear it. They'll say, well, it's too small. Well, a big study of a randomized controlled clinical trial, double-blind placebo, Gary Taubes once said would cost $1 billion to do it well and to do it long-term, to do all the things. But we got Virta Health. They did a 3 or 4 year study now that's been ongoing. It's out there if they want to see it, but they just go, la, 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 don't see anything. Where's the studies? I don't see them, because they're not looking for them.
Right. Well, and not only that, but on top of that, there was never any studies done to create the food pyramid that we have now.
Zero.
So it's all kind of silly, but.
And in fact, the Women's Health Study was the biggest low-fat diet study ever done. It was all these nurses that were in this study, and they actually analyzed the foods that they ate, and the ones that ate the least amount of fat actually had the least or the worst health outcomes. And this was a big study, came out around 2008, 09, didn't get a lot of headlines because they didn't want that out there. I made a big deal about it in the blogging world, but didn't get a lot of headlines, and yet people still believe in the low fat. Now, it's much better than when I first started blogging and podcasting. It's way better in 2021, going into 2022 soon, than it was, but people still fear fat.
No, you're right. I can think of, this was probably, I guess I was still vegetarian at the time or something. And I was talking to a friend, and it was about, because I was eating a lot of avocados. And of course, I think his comment was something like, oh, but they've got so much fat. Isn't that bad for you? And I'm thinking, where have you been? Like, the people really not keep up with the latest thoughts in nutrition and stuff? Because by that point, it was understood that monounsaturated fat is so much better for you. You know, it's crazy to me sometimes, because all this is like what I think about on a daily basis, pretty much 24/7. Yeah. But I have to remember that a lot of people just aren't focused on that. They're not there yet. And so it's kind of our job to keep saying the same things and keep learning. I mean, I learn new stuff every day from you, and I listen to a lot of, nutrition podcasts and study on my own. And I guess that's why you hire, right? That's why you hire my husband's a financial advisor. I can't keep up with all the stuff he keeps up on a day-to-day basis. But I think the problem in health space is people don't know who to believe. And if you don't have the letters behind your name, they don't tend to believe you as much, which is unfortunate, because at this point, I've literally spent thousands of hours on this.
Yeah. Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low-carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active, or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.
Look, I have fought that letters behind my name thing for my whole career, and I came to the conclusion of I want to be relatable, and that's much more important to me, to relate to somebody. They see me and they see themselves in me, than having PhD, MD, RD. I've been offered a lot of letters. I've been offered scholarships to go get an MD, get a PhD. And I'm just like, no, I like average, everyday Jimmy Moore because I'm educated and I learn and I try to disseminate that and do it in a fun way and not be boring with it. And I feel like that penetrates the culture much more so than, okay, somebody finds me, oh, it's Dr. Jimmy Moore, which funny enough, I did a book signing with Ken Berry one time and it said, Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Jimmy Moore. And people took a picture of that. They're like, you become a Dr. Jimmy. I'm like, I don't even play one on the internet, I promise. So, but no, I relish in being able to share and be relatable because people will just assume, well, you have those credentials after your name. That's why you say what you say.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And honestly, I mean, it hasn't stopped me from finding all kinds of good sources of information from plenty of people that don't have the letters behind their name, but I just know because of their genuineness and because of the way that they speak and the way, you know, everything about it, and doing my own research, that what they're saying is valid and true. And I just don't know how other people necessarily go about that, because I think most people just don't, you know, go down the rabbit holes very often. They just kind of keep their head down and keep doing what they're doing, even if it's not working for them. And the same goes for keto for that matter. You know, my version of keto now is quite different from it was in the beginning. And I think the only way that you learn these things is to experiment on yourself. And so back to that thing where you said, don't people wish they had the one size fits all? I wish we did too, but honestly, like what works for me is just not going to work for every single person. I mean, I think there's always a good starting point when you, for example, I have the keto calculator on my website. I think that's a great starting point, but that doesn't mean that whatever macros that spits out, that's going to work for you 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road. Actually, that's what I'm working on right now, is this kind of a keto fat loss kickstart kind of thing, integrating some of the newer things that I've been playing around with and working on, and just seeing like, hey, does this work for me? So if I put that program out there, can I guarantee it's going to work for you? I can't, but I can test it on myself. And it's a starting point, you know, it's in some ideas for new things or things to try.
Well, and let's get into, always been kind of a pet peeve for me, because people say, well, keto didn't work for me. And that's code for didn't lose weight or didn't lose as much weight. And so since when do we put all the onus on a diet to only produce one health outcome? Aren't there other benefits that come not just from a diet, but also even lifestyle things that are way more interesting? And it's a sad part of diet culture, Cheryl, where we have the people that they only predicate the success of a diet, when it's not just diet, on their weight, when it's not just weight. It's funny that there's so many other ways to I guess track and see how you're doing, and so many other things that you can do to produce that end result, people just get so confused. That didn't work. Well, what do you mean by that? Oh, I didn't lose weight. Well, did you not feel great? Oh, I felt great. Oh, was your hunger under control? Oh yeah, I had no hunger at all. I'm like, it works. It just didn't produce the result that you wanted, but that doesn't mean it wasn't doing anything for you.
Right. And I wish we had a word. I just wish we had a synonym for diet, because I think anytime you put diet behind something, people's brain automatically goes to weight loss, right? In fact, I sometimes try to say to people, well, however you choose to eat, like not your diet, because I think whenever you say the word diet, people automatically think weight loss. Well, but it's like, it's not as succinct and easy to say the way of eating. You know,
they say lifestyle, which can encompass your diet and other things, but that doesn't really, but way of eating, that's what a lot of people.
Yeah, it's just kind of clunky, right?
Well, and the WOE. So I said, what is your WOE? Yeah, it's the keto.
So like diet for short. When I say diet to people, or what I'm thinking in my head when I say, oh yeah, I never say I follow the keto diet. I say I do keto, whatever do keto means. But like if you were to say keto diet, to me that does have more like of a weight loss connotation. So it's interesting with the marketing choices of that stuff too. It's like, okay, it's a way of eating, it's a way of living, a way of being, maybe. I don't know. It's something like that, but I wish there was a better word.
And from a marketing perspective, saying diet actually is better, because that does turn on something in people's brains of, ooh, I want to lose weight. Ooh, I want to get healthy, even though they don't really care about that as much as they do the weight loss. But it's just always been a dichotomy to me that we put all this onus on one thing, your nutrition, to produce this one thing, weight loss. When in actuality, it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's exercise, it's sunlight exposure. I could go down the line of all these things. And then in actuality, it's the results are weight loss, lowering of inflammation, lowering of blood sugar and insulin, regulating your hormones, so many things. Is it just too much for people to process that you got all these things that lead to all these things and the one in one makes it easier?
Yeah, I don't know, because I guess because I have been so focused on health for a long time, for me, after learning what I've learned about eating in this way, the effects of too many carbohydrates in the body, the effects of just, maybe fructose might have some issues, or just for different kinds of foods, the seed oils, the canola oil, all that stuff. I like to really look at it from this health perspective. And so for me, it's like not even a question to me, would I go back to carbs? Like I said, on occasion, if I want something real, I will eat it, and I make that choice and I feel fine about it. But for my long-term health, which is what I'm more concerned about with all the cancer in my family, I'm convinced after reading everything I've read that this is honestly the healthiest way for humans to eat. It's the way that we always ate before we had all this processed garbage available. And so to me, you can't convince me that I need to add carbs back into my life for any other reason other than they're tasty and I want to. You know what I mean? So again, that's kind of what the excuse is with people's minds, because I think if your goal is true health, and for me, I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent cancer. It's why I do an extended fast every single month. Do you think I love it to do that every month? No, I love to eat and I love to cook, so I'd rather not. But for me, it's like, okay, I've identified my goal is let's try to do everything I can to not get cancer. And so for me, fasting is a very important part of that. And so I think it's a mindset shift as well, which is, I like that you're doing that new show where you guys, talk about more of that kind of stuff, because I think there is a psychology to getting healthier and losing weight that people far underestimate. Because it's one thing to have a program or a thing that people can try, or even just keeping keto simple, eating your meat and veggies. After a while, you've got to have something in your brain that keeps you on track, when in our world, not only is this other stuff available all the time, but you have still all kinds of experts, quote unquote, telling us that we need to be eating a certain amount of grains and healthy whole grains and carbs. So it's like, how do you stay the course when you're constantly being bombarded with commercials and experts, and every store that you walk into, the thing that's front and center is the donuts. Like as soon as you walk in the door, I mean, unless you have the right mindset, that's going to be hard to manage all that, I think. And so luckily I don't know how I think it was my dad, quite honestly, is how I got this hard-headedness about me. But for me, kind of once I set my mind on something, I'm pretty good. But that is not the case for everybody. And I think it's a real disservice that people in this space, especially, and I not to say this about doctors, but they do tend to think, lots of them tend to think that people just aren't following it. When really it's not that they're not following it, it's that they're not in the right place mentally to be able to do it.
Mentally, and haven't dealt with past traumas. They haven't dealt with the crap in their lives. And I was going to go into kind of the stress aspect of this too. And, and we've been propagandized long before the last couple of years. Last couple of years, yes, very much so. It's been a big psyop on the whole world. But for decades, we've been propagandized that, well, you got to cut your fat because that's going to lead to heart disease. And it's never been true. Ever. It's never been true. And yet people believe it, because if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the reality in people's minds. And so overcoming that is the big thing. I've long said in this community that if we got people to stop fearing saturated fat, that is the last vestige that I think prevents a low carb ketogenic approach from being fully embraced by our culture. Now, not everybody will, but the general society still fears fat so much. But if they got over it, but the problem is saturated fat has become Hitler in the nutrition world. Oh, you can never say anything good about Hitler, and nor should you. And so saturated fat has become that. So how do you decouple it from this negative imagery that people have about it? That's the hard thing that I've been working on for 17 years.
I think, honestly, that's all you can do, and all that people in this space can do is to just keep we repeat it often enough, people finally believe it. But the one thing I am kind of excited about, and I'm sure you already heard about this, but Dave Feldman got that crowdfunding to do that study, and basically they're going to take scans of people's heart. Dave Feldman is an engineer that works on cholesterol theory, and he has sort of a different theory. So, before when I was talking about losing weight and my body actively shuttling fat around, a lot of that is based on Dave Feldman's theories and his work and the education that I got by listening to him. So anyway, they're going to scan people's hearts, and these are people that have very high cholesterol. And then a year later, follow up, have them continue doing the diet they've been doing for years now that they gave them this higher cholesterol, and test it again so that we can really have visible results.
Yes.
If they think saturated fat creates, and so we'll have more concrete evidence. Now, I guess it remains to be seen, but he seems pretty convinced, that that's not going to be the case. But being the good scientist he is, you got to put the hypothesis out there, you got to test it, and let's actually, see what the data is. So once that's out, it'll at least be something that we can point to that is a little more valid. But until then, it's hard to change people's minds, even when you tell them about Ansel, what is it, Ansel Keys? I always, and how the sugar industry got paid off, so they blamed it on fat instead, and was like, that's how we got to where we are. It's not really based on any good science. So the stuff that's happened since then has, I think, been more like epidemiology, and because cardiologists will still think that, but there's plenty of cardiologists that are coming over to the dark side, right? Like Brett Schurz with the Diet Doctor, he's a cardiologist, and there's this other guy in England. Oh, he's got an interesting name. I can't think of it right now.
Theme Malhotra.
Yes, thank you. I knew you'd know the name, but it is slowly starting to move that way. So I guess, once we get the health aspect of it down, if we can really show some more evidence, and I think some of that is coming with brain health in particular, more than some of the others, and, the ability for ketosis to help with Alzheimer's disease. So I think it's starting to shift, but it's definitely a hard sell with saturated fat.
Well, I can tell you there is more ketogenic research ongoing right now than there's ever been. And it's because of the popularity in the mainstream, all these researchers were starting to get funding. And, oh, wow, there's all these people doing this ketogenic diet, go research it. And of course, by the time the research comes out of these, the majority of the research, it's long after the trend is over. So we see all this research later, but ketogenic didn't just start getting researched the last 5 years. It's been researched for decades now. But really hot and heavy right now. It's something a lot of people don't realize. There is going to be a crap load of back-ended research, and hardly any of it has anything to do with weight loss. It's mostly about brain health, and granted, a lot of the research is also funded by and using exogenous ketones, which is cool. All right, it's going to be a proxy for what would happen if you make it endogenously, but really, really good research that is out there. So good news is happening with ketogenic approach about it. The problem with research is once it comes out, then it has to trickle 10, 15, even 20, 25 years before it gets to the mainstream. And by then, the next trend, who knows what the next trends are?
God, I don't know. But I think, and I always have prided myself on remaining open-minded to new information and new research. So obviously, if somehow they do find out pretty definitively, like, hey, well, maybe eating a whole bunch of saturated fat does, cause some cardiac issues. I mean, I've got to be open to hearing that, right? But I think the interesting thing to consider as well when you're thinking about something like that is because there's a lot of stuff about the cardiac versus all-cause mortality, and especially in women. Some of the reading I've done has said that, women that have higher cholesterol, all-cause mortality is much lower.
Yes.
And then there's health span versus lifespan as well. So if I don't ever eat any bacon ever again in my life, which would be a travesty, and I live 3 years longer, but meanwhile, I'm eating cardboard for 30, 40 years. I mean, what's the trade-off there? So I think there's also a little bit of that to consider for people. It's like, okay, well, do you want to live the maximum amount you can live, but meanwhile, you've gotten so weak because you've been vegetarian for all those years, you have no muscle left, you can't do anything, you can't pick up your grandkids, you can't get out of your chair? Or do you want to live vivaciously and and happily and, you know, strong and all of that, but maybe live for 2 less years or something. I don't know. I think I'd take that trade-off personally. I'd rather be vibrant and strong for a slightly shorter amount of time than be weak and frail and can't move and lose my brain because I've sugared it all up, you know?
So I interviewed one of the vegan diet advocates one time. I love getting the other side sometimes, the dark side sometimes.
I thought we were the dark side.
But Dean Ornish, very famous low-fat vegan doctor, and he made a comment on my podcast. Do you want to live longer, or it seemed like you're living longer because it's just dragging out because it's a horrible So it's like, you just described what I think about a vegan diet, Dr. Ornish. Well, we could keep talking on and on. Guys, go check out Heal, Nourish, Grow. It's now a podcast, so healnourishgrowpodcast.com. Yours truly, episode 4 of her show, so go check that out. I put it in my stories on Instagram if you guys want to go watch. And healnourishgrow.com has all of the recipes and everything that you do there. And, of course, over on the Instagrams, as we call it, it's obviously Heal, Nourish, Grow as well. Of course, my phone wants to go crazy on me right when I'm trying to look you up. Heal, Nourish, Grow.
No, I'll make it easy. It's literally Heal, Nourish, Grow, like everywhere.
Yes, yes.
No dots, no dashes, no nothing.
Go follow her. Yes, brilliant, by the way. I'm living low carb, man, everywhere for the same reason. I want people to be able to find me. So, but Cheryl McColgan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks again, Jimmy, for having me. This was so fun. I love
Get
it.
inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
Tired of playing the mask game? Me too. That's why I wanted to tell you about the Unmask. This is a breathable, completely breathable. It covers, you can't even see that it's breathable, but it's breathable. Whether you're going on a plane, having to go into a store and wearing this thing, playthemaskgame.com is how you can get this mask. They come in all kinds of colors and everything. In fact, right there, you can see right through it what it is, but when you're wearing it, it does not look like it's anything different, but it's breathable, baby. Playthemaskgame.com.